All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Lorraine Clarno with the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start with some just brief introductions and ground rules for how Thinking Thursday is going to run today. We will be initiating a poll in short order to find out who is on and what your experience has been with PPP. A little bit of a flip to Thinking Thursday this year for 2020. We actually decided to ask you folks in a survey in December what kind of information and topics were top of mind for you going into this year of recovery. And by far, the number one answer was access and assistance to applying for grants and identifying resources available for your businesses. So with that said, in very short order, we put together today's Thinking Thursday and want to thank Glacier Bank and JCCS very much for coming on to give us up-to-date information and answer your questions on the latest round of PPP that is being rolled out from the federal government. We might even be able to ask a few questions about EIDL loans and that kind of thing as well. Today, it is my privilege and honor to introduce Jake Carter with JCCS. He is a CPA and a tax partner in that firm, a Montana-based accounting firm with locations all across our state, 2 here in the Flathead. He happens to be in Whitefish, but they also have an office in Kalispell. Jake is one of the members of the firm's COVID-19 task force team, and since March, his team has been presenting webinars, assisting clients and local businesses with all things PPP related, as well as other SBA programming, tax credits, payroll compliance, and accounting standards that all relate to our unique year of COVID-19. And we also have wonderful Peter Akey from Glacier Bank. He is the Senior Vice President and the Commercial Loan Department Manager. Glacier Bank is a community bank providing traditional banking products throughout its branches in the Flathead, Lincoln, Lake, Deer Lodge, Silver Bow counties in Montana. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and initialize the poll. And what we're going to do is start with Jake, who is going to give us kind of the 30,000 foot level of what this PPP phase 2 looks like. And then Pete will be talking after Jake and addressing how we go about accessing it and those type of things. So here goes the poll, and I'm going to turn it over to Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Lorraine. And welcome everybody. I see the poll just popped up. I better answer my question here. It did not apply for me. I'll say that. So I'm going to give a brief kind of overview and explanation of sort of where we're at right now, and give kind of the what behind what's going on, and then we're going to let Pete talk about how the heck we implement all of that and go about doing that. So I guess as we all know, the second round of PPP has now been implemented and approved. A lot of the funding is starting to come through, and we should be able to apply for that here shortly. In general, what has happened is the second round of funding has been made available to select businesses. And one of the first things I like to point out is that it's considered round 2, but it also could be a first draw, first time for a lot of businesses. And that could be for several different reasons. Some businesses just didn't think they either needed it at the time, or there was a lot of uncertainty as if I should get a first round loan or not. And so I first want to address that whether you're here because and this poll will tell us here shortly exactly who's received one of the round 1 PPPs and who has not. Kind of regardless of the answer, you can still apply whether it's your first or second time, assuming you fit the criteria. And so for a first time draw PPP, it's pretty, we're going back to the original rules of maximum loan sizes of $10 million, 500 or fewer employees, and obviously the need for the loan, and you can support those amounts. If that's the case, you're good to go. For the second time filers and second draws, It's little different subsets. So maximum $2 million loan, 300 employees or less. And then the big qualifier is that you need to be able to show a reduction in gross receipts in any quarter of 2020 as compared to that same quarter of 2019. So again, 25% decrease in gross receipts. That has its own definition. What the heck is a gross receipt? Because there's a lot of things. One of the questions I've been getting a lot is, well, if I receive PPP funds in Q2 of 2020, do I have to add those into my gross receipts? And I can tell you, I'll just try to throw that answer out there really quick for you. It is our understanding that you do not. So the way you attempt to approach it, and hopefully as we go along here, Pete, by all means, whoa, Jake, time out. That's not how I understand it, but I'm giving you as best knowledge as I can give. So for an example like that, when you get the PPP fund forgiven, in theory, and as I'll point out here soon, that's a non-taxable event now. Because it's a non-taxable event, they will not deem it as a gross receipt. So for example, however, it is our understanding, we're going to still wait for a little bit more guidance on this, but for example, the Montana stabilization grants, for example, are going to be deemed taxable. So it is our understanding we will include that in gross receipts for purposes of this test. Now, like a lot of things, and what I think is going to change on a daily basis for this next week or so is perhaps we will get guidance on we don't have to add that in because that's not really the intent. I mean, what's a gross receipt? That's not in your ordinary operational day-to-day business yet. It's our assumption because it's taxable, you should add it in. But again, items like that are going to be pretty fluent going forward in terms of getting more guidance. So back to where I was talking about being a first or second time draw. If it's your second time draw, you will have that 25% gross receipt test that you have to satisfy, 25% gross receipt reduction in any quarter of 2020 as compared to that same quarter of 2019. The other catch for first and second time draws is that you have to have been in business as of February 15th, 2020. So if you had started business this past summer in 2020, this will not apply to you, unfortunately. And that's just, I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbled in this case. You're going to have to seek out other means of funding, whether it's an EIDL, stabilization grants, and stuff like that. And so that's probably the most important thing to understand is the terms and the conditions for a first or second time filer in this program. A couple other things I will point out that just kind of is new in the tax world. I kind of mentioned a second ago. So guidance came out that the first round of the PPP, if you were able to secure that, use that appropriately, 60% of the costs went through payroll. You got that all forgiven. It's now been confirmed that not only is it not taxable, but all those expenses that you use those funds for are in fact deductible. The total double dip victory for the taxpayer and the businesses. So that's great news. And that was really the intent behind the original CARES Act, is kind of something, this is unseen pandemic stuff. And so this is the benefits that they were trying to push through. Also, a lot of you probably were able to get the EIDL emergency grants. Those are the ones that were probably in the range of $1,000 to $10,000. Those too are now considered to be fully non-taxable, hopefully not to be included in gross receipts for this test. I know a lot of people who are applying right now for forgiveness were under the original assumption, as were a lot of us, Pete, myself included, that ultimately that number somehow was going to get reconciled by the SBA to reduce your forgiveness amount on your first round of PPP. And that has all kind of finally been put to rest. You don't reduce your forgiveness, and it's not taxable. Again, just really good pro-taxpayer consequences in this past round that were all wrapped in this kind of second round of PPP funding. But I'm just kind of giving you some of the highlights of that first round too. And then also for those that are applying for your first round forgiveness, and to note for your second round or potential first round of PPP funds, the new number for kind of a streamlined forgiveness process is now going to be $150,000 loan or less. So if you had a loan and you had yet to apply for forgiveness, whether it's however much up to 100% forgiveness, there will be now a new form coming out. This will be, I believe, the fourth version of a forgiveness application form That will be specifically if your loan was $150,000 or less. Very streamlined, should get the full forgiveness there, assuming all the funds and the conditions were met to spend the money. And then again, if it's going to be your first or this will be your second round of funding, you too will be able to use that form as well, the $150,000 or less forgiveness application. So just be mindful of that. Look for a little bit more streamlined process once you are able to start spending that money on this round 2 of funds. Let's quickly also talk about why are we getting this money? What can we use the money for, right? Obviously, in PPP is paycheck. The idea is for this money, in theory, to be helping pay employees. And so obviously they retained that condition to spend the money on wages. And so there's rules. I won't go into the weeds too much, but if I'm a single member LLC or business, there's a little different rules on how much I can use that money for, let alone how much of a loan size I can get. A little different than if I actually have a separate employee. I've hired an employee. There's a little different way of calculating that. That's the importance of talking to your accountant, working with Pete and your local banker to make sure, it's not just here's your loan. It's very critical that you calculate the amount correctly, because I can promise you, you will use it. We will figure out a way to use that money. And so you don't want to leave a dollar on the table. You want to make sure you get every dollar you deserve. And there's very strict calculations on how you do that. And just make sure we walk through that. But in general, it's your gross wages that are included. Those two are also, that was that definition of how you get your loan and what you spend the money on is still the same as in round 1, if you're familiar with those rules. So it's payroll expenses, so gross wages, certain retire benefits, certain group health plan benefits, and then they call it taxes paid to state and different states and localities. Be careful of that definition. UI, work comp, those items cannot be included, but you just make sure you dial in on those expenses. So payroll expenses, if you have business debt, the interest on those loans are able to be included. Business rents, so if you're renting your space, that you can use the money for rent, as well as utilities for the business. So those are all the ones that were in round 1 that are still in round 2, and then round 2 expanded a little bit as well, and they're throwing in the four they added. They're calling them operation expenditures, property damages costs, supplier costs, and worker protection expenditures. So again, don't want to go into the weeds, but just be aware that there's a lot. They've expanded the definition of what you can spend this money on, and just make sure you again work with your accountant or read the instructions really well, the definitions of this latest Consolidated Appropriations Act to find that definition. The document's only 5,000 pages long, so it'll be a piece of cake to find that definition. Trust me, I have to read it usually about 20 times to begin to think I know the definition. So it's a shame, but that's what we're here for, and that's what people like Pete and myself are there for. So please lean on us. We're happy to help. So be aware of that. And then this is why I think it's important we mention what you can spend the money on. There's going to be there's also, as part of the second round, to tangent off the PPP a little bit, be aware that they've also enhanced there's an employer tax credit out there for certain payroll expenses that you incur. And so if we all remember back in 2020, you could get the first round of the PPP funds, but that precluded you from being able to take advantage of a tax credit. And so we initially, back in March and April, were thinking, gosh, okay, which one's more advantageous? Should I hold off on taking the PPP, or should I use the credit? Well, the PPP not only was instantaneous money, but 99 out of 100 times it was just better to go with the PPP money. And so now what is happening is not only can you get a PPP loan, but you now can also utilize the credit. Except just be aware, you can't use the same dollar with PPP funds to go also get a credit. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm working with a couple of clients right now where we're trying to dial in on, okay, can we optimize it, so to speak? Can I get the credit on some wages paid and then also secure not only the PPP money, but then spend that PPP money appropriately? And where my mind goes as just a comment here is during the first round and pushing applications to Pete for forgiveness, Pete's saying, okay, if you're going to give us rents and you're going to give us utility costs and you're going to give us payroll numbers, here's the documentation we need. Well, we had 24 weeks to spend that money, and guess what? We spent everything on payroll for sure. So we just gave the payroll information, right? It was just easier and slam dunk. Pete's pushing it through, and we're done, right? Well, now the potential strategy here could be to utilize the rents that you're paying, it might be a little more complicated of an application to present to the bank. However, you could maybe also take advantage of some payroll tax credits as well. So that's going to be important. You work with your accountant or whoever it is that's helping you with this to maybe look at optimizing. But if not, the PPP is just going to be another fantastic program available for all the businesses to take advantage of, assuming you qualify. And so I think I'll leave it at that. If I think of something else while Pete's talking, I'll be sure to make a note. I guess do you want me to answer any initial questions, Lorraine, or Pete, do you have anything that you wanted to
I would say let's, if I could ask everybody in attendance to put your questions in the Q&A, stay out of the chat for me and stick with Q&A. And then after Pete talks through more of the process and the how, then we'll go back to questions.
Great.
Sound good?
Okay.
Wonderful.
I'll hand it off to Pete.
Jake.
All right, thanks, Jake. Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, so I, might touch on a couple things that Jake already touched on, and Jake, same, jump in anytime if you feel like I'm straying off course. Basically, again, the two funding sources are first draw and second draw. So first draw, if you have not, for whatever reason, received a PPP, with the PPP coffers being filled back up, you are eligible if you fit the requirements that are the same as they were before. So the second draw really is the primary focus, I guess, that we're looking at right now. But with that, basically the requirements that we're looking at is, have you received a PPP loan before? Did you use or will you use the funds and exhaust them per the guidelines? Will you use the full amount? Have you no more than 300 employees? And are you not applying for the shuttered venue grant? Then if you can provide the 25% reduction, then you're for those purposes, you are qualified to apply for the second grant. 25% reduction, basically quarter over quarter on reporting the same times over 2019 to 2020. One of the big things that we're looking at right now is as our institution, and I guess I'll speak about the industry as a whole. CFIs are open right now, community financial institutions. So if you think of institutions like MoFi, they're open right now for PPP applications, both first and second round draws. So the first round draw, they were open on Monday. Second round draw opened on Wednesday of this last week. And part of the reason for the SBA doing that is to service some of those maybe underbanked businesses out there, trying to reach some of the entrepreneurs, maybe those that don't have checking accounts or a traditional banking relationship. Moving on tomorrow, Friday, they're opening it to smaller banks. And then on Tuesday, it opens for all SBA partnership lending institutions to provide those funds. One of the big things that changed that was a positive, and Jake, I don't know if you touched on this, was they included 501c6s. They also included 501c19 veteran organizations, tribal businesses, some housing corporations, things of that nature. So they expanded the scope of businesses that could apply for it, which is great. So one of the other great things that changed, I don't know if Jake, you touched on this as well, is NAICS code 72. So any food accommodations or food preparation or accommodations such as hotels, hospitality types, their multiplier is 3.5 versus the 2.5. So it provides a little more oomph for those businesses, which definitely in the markets that we serve, we're definitely seeing those are the businesses that need it. So that's a positive change. One of the things I think you'll see also is the 100 there's per the application, there's a $150,000 mark. And if you apply for and receive 150 or less, you do not have to provide supporting documentation for the initial application. 150 and above, you do have to provide that documentation to support the 25% reduction in revenue. We would recommend that you provide it either way, even if you are under 150. And the reason that is because when you get to the debt forgiveness piece, you're going to have to provide it anyways. So we recommend providing that ahead of time as our institution, but again, not required, but we highly recommend that. One of the things that we're working on, for those that remember this PPP thing as it kicked off last spring, almost a year ago now, which is kind of scratch my head and think about that, is we literally were building the plane while we were flying it. I've heard that analogy many times. Now we somewhat have the path paved, which is good for not only the businesses that need that, but accountants, bankers, and everybody that has to be involved in the process. So it should be somewhat more of a smoother process. We've learned from the process and are able to enhance our process as well. And I'm sure most banks have done that as well. We at Glacier Bank are doing a digital format. Once we open up for applications, which looks like it's going to be Tuesday per the SBA guidance as of yesterday. We will be doing it digitally. We're doing it through DocuSign. I know some institutions are taking paper copies. Some are doing it through portals. So I would just recommend that whatever institution you're working with, you reach out to them, look at their website and find out exactly what their process is and what they recommend and are requiring. Another item that I wanted to address is the overall application seems fluid, I guess I would call it. Jake, I don't know what you would call it. The number of times that the applications have changed, or the number of times the rules or guidance have changed is numerous. It's more than I can count on my fingers. And so I would just say that patience is key when dealing with PPP. Things change constantly. As Jake pointed out, professionals like himself and myself and all of the bankers and accountants out there, we try to stay up to date as much as possible on the guidance and the rules as they change. But as things get passed through the Congress and then get distributed through the Treasury or through the SBA, things change, and then updated guidance, things that maybe weren't thought of before are addressed and moved forward. So I wish that we could say we have all the answers, but at the same time, we're happy to research things as well. And so with that, Lorraine, I guess that would wrap up my comments as well.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Peter and Jake. We have questions in the queue, and I'll just start by reading them one at a time here out to the audience. And either one of you jump in, both, however it works best. The first question is, by quarter, is it referring to a calendar quarter, January through March, April through June, or any consecutive 3-month time period in 2020?
Yeah, that's a good question. My understanding is it's quarter, like the actual January through March, so a calendar quarter. I will note, though, that there are some specific provisions for seasonal businesses, and I admittedly don't know that definition offhand. I'm going to shoot from the hip and say it's something like if you can receive X number percentage of revenues within a 6-month time frame, something along those lines. There's a way to prove that. Pete, do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't, Jake. I don't know the answer.
So I would say, just to answer that question, it is the calendar quarter, unless you are a true seasonal business. And then we gotta dial in on A, the definition of that, and then B, what number you can use for that. Because that was addressed on this latest round, was that there are some seasonal people that, when you look back at 12 months and divide it by 12. Well, really, that's not accurate. It's here's what our actual number is. So, yeah, it's very circumstantial, but potential to be there.
All
But I would
right.
operate for now on a calendar quarter.
Thank you. Tom is asking, can you please repeat the limitations you stated for applying for a second PPP draw?
Yeah, let me pull those back up. So basically what we're looking at right now is have you received a PPP loan already? Have you used the funds as intended, and are they going to be exhausted before you bring in before we distribute the new funds? You do not, from what I understand, and Jake, jump in if we're looking at this wrong. You do not have to apply for forgiveness prior to applying for a second round of PPP, but you do have to use all the funds prior to getting them.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
Very sorry to interrupt, Pete. The definition that I recall, which I think is have or will have used. Yes. Right. And what I don't know, this is a question we're getting a lot, is okay, I will, Jake, I promise. Will Pete allow the money to come out for round 2? That's what I don't quite know. And it doesn't preclude them from applying. You will get it. It's just
correct.
Is it a matter of saying, okay, I finally use it? I don't know how they're going to have a mechanism for that. So I think it's going to be, yes, we will use it. And then you'll get that second round as well.
Yeah. And some of the initial guidance we got from the SBA was so a business is allowed to apply, but we cannot distribute the new funds until the old funds have been exhausted. So
there you go. Perfect.
Have no more than 300 employees. And then, again, that shuttered venue grant, you can't have both from what we're understanding initially. And I see in the chat box, there's a question about that. I'm not an expert at that grant. I don't know the limitations or what that grant is exactly for. But then also is the 25% reduction in comparable period 2019 to 2020. And again, we're tracking the same thing within the specific quarter, the traditional specific quarters that Jake just discussed. So.
And in business as of February 15, 2020.
Correct. Thank you. Yep.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
And I can take sorry, Lorraine, I think if you're going after that shuttered venue grant, I can take this is an attempt at it. So in essence, we have to look at the definition of what a shuttered venue is. I believe it's specifically targeted at NAICS code 72. I believe it's opened up, and I believe that would include, I'm trying to think of a local example of that. If we had like an amphitheater business or something like that, I know there's a thing down in Missoula that would probably qualify. So I haven't messed with this one too much, but it's along those lines. And then it's a very significant grant. I believe it's up to $10 million. So it's a little bit more expansive than the $2 million for second time draws on the PPP. And I believe it's a function of your gross revenues. And so it's going top line as opposed to bottom line for sole proprietors and wage based. So very significant if you are in that realm of A, you had to be fully shut down, and B, you're in that entertainment, bar, restaurant scene. Definitely need to explore that option more. And I admittedly don't know all the true definitions, but I recall in our being something like 40% of revenues. And so that's why Pete's making sure you didn't get that, because that is a substantial amount of money carved off for that. And so it's going to behoove that business to probably go after that grant before the PPP. I would assume, especially if it's in the questionnaire for the PPP, they don't want people to double dip on that for sure. Yeah. So definitely whoever's asking that question, definitely a good one to look into.
Yeah. I was in a U.S. Chamber webinar this past week on a similar topic, and they spoke quite a bit about this, and it is geared to the entertainment industry and live performances. That's another key things. However, they include museums in that. So it's a bit quirky, but something definitely I think a number of our folks in the Flathead would qualify for. So definitely something to talk to their bankers and CPAs about for sure. What percentage of the reduction in gross receipts in any comparative quarter in 2020 to 2019 do you have to show?
25%.
Perfect. If our organization received a grant for reduced income / revenue in 2020, for example, the Department of Commerce CARES grant, does that count against the percent reduction?
I don't know the answer. Is that so it restated? So they're asking if they receive the Department of Commerce from the state of Montana CARES funds, does that go towards the reduction?
I believe that is the question.
Overall?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one.
Our interpretation from the accounting AICPA sort of the way we are attempting to back into that answer is were the dollars taxable? And so we are taking the position that yes, a Montana stabilization grant, for example, which is by definition taxable income, will be included in our clients' gross income, would unfortunately be added into that quarter's gross receipts. Is that the intent? I don't think so. But again, we do not have, there is no SBA guidance today at this minute that says state stabilization grants, while they are taxable, are not included for gross receipts. However, as Pete mentioned, I might have mentioned, I mean, we are on our 40th piece of next round of guidance, so to speak, clarifications to clarifications. This one will be inevitably included to come. And so speaking to a point that Pete made, and to circle back around to round one of PPP, I remember when back in March, the terms that some Congress people were using was first come, first serve. And that was oh my gosh, my head went spinning because then the phone lit up. And we got something yesterday from the AICPA and they don't come out and say too many things as assertively as they did. And they said, there will be no shortage of funds. They've done the math forwards and backwards on who they think will be able to qualify. And they're saying it's certain. Now, what does that mean? I don't know, but that speaks to the idea that the money will be there. And I also mentioned that we're going to have some clients that maybe are looking at waiting until March 31st, maybe, to truly apply, A, to extend the time they can use the money into the summer, and B, possibly utilizing tax credits on the front end of the year. So, think about it. Maybe don't rush it too much, but at the same time, make sure you know what you're doing. Take the time to do some cash flow analysis. Work with your banker and accountant to make sure it's the right time to take it. We all want that money. Businesses want the money. We need it. I know that. But let's slow our roll a little bit. Make sure we get this right for sure.
All right, Shauna is asking gross wages, what time frame, are tips included, and is the number of employee count what you currently have in place? Kind of a three-parter for you.
Yeah, up to a dollar amount, right? And Jake, you can jump in. I'm looking for that number right now. Up to 100,000. I believe you can include tips. So the monthly would be, I used to have that off the top of my head. It's been a while since we've done the PPP. It used to be able to roll that right off. But yeah, up to 100,000 as far as, and I do believe you can include tips. What was the second part of that question, Lorraine?
Is the number of employees the number you currently have or what you had back in March?
As far as the 300 would be currently. So if you're applying today, it would be what you have today, is my understanding.
All right. You may have mentioned this, but can the 20% reduction be applied to any consecutive 3-month period in 2020, or is it only for calendar quarters?
So it's 25% reduction, right? Not 20%. So let's make that clear. And then I believe it is within those traditional quarters as of right now. That's the guidance we're receiving.
Excellent. Should I wait for Glacier Bank to send me a new application or pull up the most recent from the SBA?
Great question. So, if I would recommend everybody. So if you're working with, happy to help you at Glacier Bank, obviously. We are sending out ours via DocuSign, which is an all-encompassing document that has some other information in it that we have to collect as a federally regulated institution. So we will send those out as requested. So say if Jake wanted to apply for a PPP loan at Glacier Bank, he would let me know as his lender or send me an email, and then we would send that out then. So we are not just going to send them out to the world, to everyone, or if you had one previously, we're not just going to hit resend. We will send them out as requested by our borrowers.
I recall with the first round of PPP, there was some confusion, and I don't know if it's been cleared. Do you have to apply for a PPP loan through your current financial institution that your business is working with?
No, you can apply at any institution that is accepting applications. The only thing I will tell you is that I know that in that first round, and speaking a little bit to what Jake was pointing out, as far as the crazy frenziness that there was I know that some people applied at maybe some different institutions that were larger, or maybe weren't ready for the capacity, and they either did not receive the funds initially that they thought they should have, or just didn't get a response at all. With a high volume of requests, certain things get dropped. At the end of the day, everybody's human that works at these institutions, and sometimes things happen. So I would highly suggest, if you already have a relationship with a lender, that you use them. But that being said, you can apply at any of these institutions.
Thank you. We have the last question in the queue is that any, all capital, any quarter? I'm not quite sure. They must be talking about the lost 2020 to 2019.
Yeah, Jacob.
Yeah, I that is our understanding. So it could be it could be one of those things. A lot of clients are telling me they had one of their best years at the end of the year. But the way that the rule is written is we're going, practically, I'm jumping right to Q2 of 2020. Yep. That's usually everyone's the bottom probably. But then when you look at Q3 and Q4, some of the businesses are up 25%, right? The rule is, if you can demonstrate a 25% reduction in one quarter of 2020 as compared to that same quarter in 19, you qualify. We're not looking at it on a year basis or anything. So you could, in theory, be up for the year, but down in one quarter and qualify. It's a great question. Yep. I've got, if I can, Lorraine, I want to comment on one thing that Pete talked about, and then I've got kind of another random comment to make. And so the first thing I'll say is, when the question came in on Glacier Bank doing using DocuSign, I can tell you I worked with a lot of people, a lot of different institutions that were facilitating all of these things. And I think one of the best ones, hands down, were Glacier Bank. So definitely a plug to Glacier Bank. Pete did not pay me to say that at all. But why I say that is because it truly is a team effort here. Every one of my clients said, this is what Pete wants me to do, but Jake, I have no idea. Can you help me? And what Glacier Bank did that I think was different than most was, not only did they utilize the technology that we kind of have to have right now, but it's the ability for me to help my client out with all the nitty gritty. And through DocuSign, we're able to do that. And then it goes to the client to truly initial everything. And so don't underestimate kind of the ability of your team. Definitely surround yourself with the right team, because it makes it that much better. So if you are in need, I definitely talk to Pete and his crew, because I can just tell you firsthand, I was struggling. Not just other local banks did great. I will not name any names, but like larger banks were a nightmare. I had to tap out because I couldn't help. So definitely utilize a local resource for sure, because gosh, there's nothing like being able to call up someone and be able to just ask the question, where am I at? Or so I just want to mention that. Secondly, something we haven't talked about, it's a change from the first round of PPP funding. Not sure if we have any farmers on the call, but and if you know anyone that's in this industry, they're usually not the ones that are doing this sort of thing. So you need to kind of put your feelers out there and tell people, if they are in the farming industry, there's a very unique way for them to get this second round of PPP money, because as opposed to going to a bottom line of a Schedule F, which is a farm income and loss schedule on their tax return, they can actually go to the top line and use gross receipts, which is just that's a huge thing. So for any farmers out there, talk to accountant, call me, call anyone that you can to get that information, because that's a very unique provision carved out for farmers. And again, I won't go into weeds on that, but there's definitely, just know farmers specifically with the second round kind of have a little perk built in, as long as a couple of things go through and qualify. Chances are it might be their first round, so they won't have to show the reduction, even though they probably do have a reduction. It's just very, very unique. Pete, do you have anything to comment on that? Have you seen anything working?
I would just, I think that's a great point, Jake. There was a number of farmers in the first round that we weren't able to qualify because of what you're saying, and that change to that top line is going to be a great benefit for them. So right. We'll be able to qualify the farmers this time. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Alyssa has popped in with another question for you. With the first round of PPP for forgiveness, we had to show that we kept the same number of employees through June. Is there a similar stipulation for this second round?
I don't believe that has changed as far as keeping the same number of employees. So if you apply, Jake, you can jump in, but this is our understanding, is that if you applied today, the number of employees you put on that application, you'd have to maintain that level of employees through the debt forgiveness piece. And just to expand a little bit, I don't know if Jake, you covered this and maybe I missed it. One of the other changes that has come up is the 8 to 24 weeks. Yeah. So initially you had to use the funds in 8 weeks, and then they adjusted it so you could use 24 weeks. Now they've adjusted it so you can use somewhere in between if it matches your payroll better, which is an added benefit as well. So you're not regimented or stuck with either of those time frames.
Thank you. With the EIDL grant advances that were released, I hear they are to be excluded from PPP forgiveness. Is this correct?
Yeah. So with this act, so initially, so if everybody remembers, I know a number of businesses applied for those EIDL grants and didn't know if their application went through, if they were getting the money, and then all of a sudden, increments of $1,000 would show up in their checking account, and then they'd call their banker and say, "Hey, where's this money from?" And I would say, "I don't know, because we didn't put it in there. I don't know where you got it. Did you apply for an EIDL grant?" Well, what's an EIDL grant? So for our understanding, initially, we were to back those out of the PPP forgiveness. So we had a number of forgiven loans that had a balance left over anywhere from 1,000 up to 10,000. But now with this new round, with this new act that has just been passed at the end of December, that goes away, and that will be forgiven as part of that. And I ask for patience. It'll take time for the SBA to figure out how they're going to roll that out, because we do have already some loans that are forgiven. that were under the old rules, and those numbers were backed out. So there's a residual amount that is sitting in their loan right now. But the SBA has said that they're going to figure out how to forgive those as well. So.
Someone popped in. What if I've already paid it back?
Same thing. I will tell you that the SBA has said that they're going to figure out how to refund those as well.
If I'm a sole proprietor and the only employee of my company, do I qualify for round 2?
Yeah, as long as you follow all those stipulations we've already discussed, yes.
And I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but excuse me, someone who'd emailed into me earlier that will be watching a replay had asked to really define how you define payroll, and can they include benefits in that number?
Yes, so it's definitely it's a very tough definition to just say over a setting like this, because there are there's little nuances that you have to be mindful of. But in general, it's gross wages. I have a little cheat sheet here. I better pull it up. In general, it's gross wages, certain retirement benefits, certain group health plan benefits, and then certain taxes paid to states in different localities. So it really depends. I know that's not the best answer to give, but I would need to see what the payroll looks like, and then we can very quickly identify what each of those are before I just mass say group health plan benefits. That's got a different definition whether you're an S corp and it's a greater than 2% shareholder who has health insurance versus a true health plan offered to all employees. So just there's little catches in there that I want to just be careful of saying what the true definition is, and it's a little bit more complex. Pete, do you have a blanket statement on that at all? Or
no, I think you did a good job, Jake.
Okay. Hopefully that helps, Lorraine.
No, that's great. Well, that's the end of the questions in the queue and what I had received in advance. Would either of you like to say a few words to wrap this up?
So I would just like to and back up just on Jake's comment, and JCCS didn't pay me for this as well. But, working with JCCS is the same. And like Jake said, other accountants as well. Utilize your resources that you have available to you. Utilize your banker, utilize your accountant. The accountants are digging into things that maybe the banker is not, and then the banker's digging into things that maybe the accountant isn't as well. So utilizing your entire team really is helpful to make sure that you get full benefit of these programs. So appreciate what JCCS has done and other accountants, and just thank you. And I would remind everybody, just, things are going to change, but have patience and stay tuned.
That's great. Thank you so much, both of you, Jake and Pete. Great information, great session. If people have questions they think of later, would you like them to direct them to me and send them out to you? Or would you like to take them directly?
I think if they went to you, Lorraine, probably first. And
okay, perfect. So for everybody's benefit, my email is l.clarno, CLARNO @kalispellchamber.com. And also use that address, please, if you have other topics that you would like to see us use our new pop-up in demand format for this type of thing. Please let me know about that too. So with that, have a wonderful finish to your week. Stay well, stay healthy. Thank you so much, Jake and Pete. Greatly appreciate your expertise. And all of you out there, let's go forward with a resilient attitude and patience and grace, and look forward to recovery in 2021. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.